This video is brought to you by Danish Class 101. Pod 101 and Class 101 courses are one of my favorite ways to start learning a new language online. Click the link in the description or visit langfocus.com/Danish class to give it a try. Finally, today we're going to talk about the Danish language, so I can explore my Danish roots. No, I am Danish. No, wait, my name is Danish.
Rødgrød med fløde.
Yeah, I can't say that. Hello everyone, welcome to the Langfocus channel, and my name is Paul. Today we're going to focus on the Danish language.
Det danske sprog.
Or just
Dansk.
as it's called in Danish. There are around 6 million native speakers of Danish, mainly in Denmark, including Greenland, but also in the state of Schleswig-Holstein in northern Germany. It's also an official language in the Faroe Islands, though it's learned as a second language there. Just like Swedish and Norwegian, Danish is a continental North Germanic language. It has historically formed a dialect continuum with Swedish and Norwegian, and on paper it's very similar to them. But when spoken, it's normally quite difficult for Swedish and Norwegian speakers to understand because of its complex phonology. A common joke is that Danes sound like they're speaking with a potato stuck in their throat, or with a mouthful of porridge. That's partly because lots of the phonemes that Swedish and Norwegian speakers would clearly pronounce seem to be slurred or even disappear in Danish. But as we'll see later, many of those pronunciation quirks are systematic and, at least to some extent, predictable. The North Germanic languages all descended from Old Norse, which developed from Proto-Germanic by the 8th century. Some variation began to develop in Old Norse, and it diverged into Old West Norse and Old East Norse, which diverged into Old Danish and Old Swedish by around the 13th century. As I mentioned in my video on Swedish, Old East Norse is sometimes referred to as either Runic Swedish or Runic Danish, depending on its location. This name reflects the fact that it was written in the runic alphabet. By the time Danish had developed into a separate language from Swedish in the 13th century, the written language of Denmark was Latin, and Danish was mainly written in the Latin alphabet, though it continued to be written with runes to a limited extent. In the mid-14th century, Danish began to be used as an administrative language, though the written language was not yet standardized, so dialectal variation and different spelling choices were evident in writing. And just like Swedish and Norwegian, Danish vocabulary was significantly influenced by Low German during the Hanseatic expansion. In the 16th century, Latin ceased to be the exclusive language of Christianity because of the Protestant Reformation, and the first Danish Bible was published in 1550. As was the case with many languages of Europe, this went a long way towards making Danish a literary language and towards standardizing it. But during this time, the characteristic phonological features that set Danish apart from Swedish and Norwegian were also developing. In the following centuries, numerous Danish grammars were written, as well as an increasing amount of literature. In the 17th century, the variety of Danish used by the Danish chancellery became the de facto standard language, and served as the basis for
Rigsdansk,
as Standard Danish is called today. One noteworthy feature of this variety of Danish was the uvular R sound. Unlike the rolled R, in other words the alveolar R, which is used in most areas of Sweden and Norway. Universal education, increased literacy, and national broadcasting in the 20th century spread the standard language to every region, making the language fairly uniform throughout the country. Dialects are now mainly limited to elderly speakers in certain areas. Danish is well known for being difficult to pronounce and difficult to understand due to its relatively complex phonology. People often describe it as not being clearly enunciated. One book that I've seen prefers the euphemisms soft and indistinct, and many sounds become reduced or dropped in Danish. For example, this word meaning product. So take a look at the spelling and imagine what it sounds like. Well, here's how it sounds in Danish.
vare,
There is far from being a one-to-one relationship between letters and sounds. You have to learn the sounds that various letter combinations make too, as well as the way certain sounds change depending on the other sounds surrounding them. Do you remember this phrase from the beginning of the video?
rødgrød med fløde,
Meaning red fruit pudding with cream? Pay attention to the D sounds.
rødgrød med fløde,
The Danish D is pronounced in a few different ways. At the beginning of a syllable, it sounds like D, or maybe like T, without aspiration. It's pronounced in a different way when it comes after a vowel in a syllable coda. In other words, it's not at the beginning of a syllable. This is the soft D sound.
blødt D,
In many books and courses, it's described as a soft th sound, like in English, the. But it really doesn't sound like that. Listen to this example meaning fat.
fed,
The soft D is often perceived as an L sound, L, by non-native speakers. It's typically a velarized laminal alveolar approximant. Rather than trying to wrap our heads around what that is, let's just think about how to make a good attempt at producing it. When you make a voiced the sound, the tip of your tongue is between your upper and lower teeth. But when you make the Danish soft D sound, the tip of your tongue touches the back of your lower teeth. And as you're making the sound, the rest of your tongue kind of rises and moves forward, bringing it close to the roof of your mouth. Your tongue never fully contacts the roof of your mouth, making it an approximant rather than a fricative. D is also not pronounced after L or N or before T or S. For example,
en alder,
meaning an age,
fanden,
meaning the devil. G is also soft at the end of words and between voiced sounds in a syllable coda. That means its place of articulation opens up and it changes from a stop to an approximant. It's almost silent or silent. For example,
et valg,
meaning a choice, and
bage,
meaning bake. G is also pronounced as one of the two vowel elements in several diphthongs, as we'll see in a minute. The letter V is also pronounced as an approximant, not usually a fricative. V. For example,
var,
V is silent after L. For example,
selv,
meaning self, and
gulv,
meaning floor. It's also silent after the vowel U. And V is pronounced as the second element in some diphthongs, as we'll see in a minute. At the beginning of words, R is pronounced as R, a voiced uvular fricative, or R, a voiced uvular approximant at the back of the throat. For example,
rask,
at the end of words, it's pronounced as a vowel. For example,
bøger,
and that's also true after a vowel in a syllable coda. Vowels. Danish vowels can be either short or long, and many of them can be pronounced more than one way depending on the other sounds adjacent to them. For example, when the letter A comes before or after R, it's pronounced A. For example,
rar,
in other contexts, it's pronounced more like A when it's a short vowel,
danske,
and it's more like A when it's a long vowel. For example,
male,
meaning paint. E is pronounced A, either as a short or long vowel,
et,
but can also be either short or long, after R.
60,
And it can be pronounced as a schwa or become silent at the end of words.
male, bage,
Danish stands out amongst the continental North Germanic languages for having lots of diphthongs. There are two categories, those with E as the second element and those with U as the second element.
hej, mig, høj, løg, livlig, blev, evne, syv, øvre, støvle, lov, bog, havl, hav, gav.
Notice that there are many cases when a combination of a vowel plus G or V represents a diphthong. That's because, at least in some contexts, they are approximants. Then, because approximants are close to vowels, the vowel plus approximant combinations become diphthongs. Unlike Swedish and Norwegian, Danish does not have pitch accent, but it does have phonemic stress accent. The meanings of some words are distinguished by differences in stress. For example,
billigst, billigst,
one unique phonological feature of Danish that other North Germanic languages don't have is called
stød,
This is like a glottal stop without complete closure of the vocal cords, resulting in what's described as a creaky voice. It's phonemic, and its presence can distinguish words that otherwise sound the same. For example,
hun,
meaning she versus
hun,
meaning dog,
hun, hun, mig,
meaning me versus
mig,
meaning May, as in the month of May.
mig, mig.
It can appear in syllables with a long vowel or in syllables with a short vowel followed by a voiced consonant. This phonological feature is not present in some dialects, specifically Southern Danish dialects. Now let's look at some sentences in order to examine some of the grammatical features of Danish.
Jeg så en film,
Meaning I saw a film. Word for word it's I saw a film. The word order is the same as in English, SVO. En is the indefinite article. The definite equivalent of this sentence is
Jeg så filmen.
meaning I saw the film. The definite article is a suffix that attaches to the end of the noun, unlike the definite article in English that comes before the noun. Danish has two genders, common gender and neuter gender.
Film.
Is a common gender noun. For a neuter noun, the article is
1. Jeg så et hus.
I saw a house. Notice that the pronunciation of the articles becomes reduced in full sentences, since they're not emphasized as keywords.
Jeg så huset.
I saw the house. Plural nouns also take indefinite and definite endings, but rather than depending on gender, they fall into one of three noun classes.
Jeg så 2 film.
I saw 2 films.
Jeg så filmene.
I saw the films. This noun class takes no suffix on the indefinite plural and the suffix
Ene.
on the definite plural.
Jeg så 2 huse.
I saw 2 houses.
Jeg så husene.
I saw the houses. In this noun class, the indefinite form has the suffix
E.
but pronounced like a schwa, and the definite form has the suffix
Ene. En bog. Bogen. Bøger. Bøgerne.
In this class, the indefinite form takes the suffix
Og.
and the definite form takes the suffix.
Ånde.
There are also some irregular nouns with different plural forms.
Jeg så den fantastiske film.
I saw the fantastic film. Word for word, I saw the fantastic film. When an adjective is used in a sentence, the definite article suffix is replaced by a standalone definite article that comes before the noun. The common gender one is
Den.
the neuter one is
Det.
the plural one is
De.
for both genders.
I morgen flyver han til London.
Tomorrow he's flying to London. Word for word it's tomorrow fly he to London. The sentences we saw before followed SVO word order, but not every sentence is SVO. Rather, the continental North Germanic languages feature V2 word order. That means that if an adverb or another element of the sentence comes first, the verb will come next and the subject will come after the verb. In Danish and the other North Germanic languages, this applies to main clauses but not to embedded clauses, though in Icelandic it applies to both. Before, we saw the first-person singular subject pronoun,
Jeg.
and here we see the third-person singular subject pronoun.
Han.
Danish personal pronouns are similar to those of English, except that the equivalent of it has both common gender and neuter forms, and there's a second-person plural pronoun, which standard English doesn't have. Of course, in vernacular English, people have different ways of expressing the second-person plural, like you all, y'all, you guys, etc. But none of those are really part of the standard language.
Han kan ikke finde sin kuffert.
He can't find his suitcase. Word for word it's, he cannot find his suitcase. This possessive
Sin.
is not on the chart. It's an additional third-person singular possessive adjective and pronoun, which indicates that the subject of the sentence is the possessor. So this sentence means that he can't find his own suitcase. In this sentence,
Han kan ikke finde hans kuffert.
the meaning is that he can't find a different person's suitcase. Sin is common gender, but there's a neuter gender equivalent
Sit.
and a plural equivalent.
Sine.
There are equivalents of these in Swedish and Norwegian as well. Notice the negative marker,
Ikke.
which comes after the auxiliary verb.
Kan.
In this particular case, the English syntax is the same, since we say can't or cannot. But in many present tense sentences in English, we use do not, while Danish doesn't use an equivalent of do. Almost no languages do. In Danish, the negative always comes after the verb.
Vi spiser ikke kød.
We don't eat meat. How about the verb itself? As in Swedish and Norwegian, verbs are not conjugated for person or number. So this present tense verb
Kan.
is exactly the same no matter who the subject is. In the past, it's always,
Kunne.
etc. Regular verbs are divided into two classes, those which end in te and those which end in ede.
Spise.
Eat,
Spiste.
ate,
Huske.
remember,
Huskede.
remembered.
Hans kuffert blev ikke fundet.
His suitcase wasn't found. Word for word, his suitcase became not found. This is a passive sentence. The passive here is formed by using the verb
Blive.
to become plus the past participle,
Fundet.
meaning found. Another way to form the passive is by adding s to the active form for regular verbs, or in this case, es.
Fandt.
Found,
Fandtes.
was found. But this passive form takes on a different meaning, so this would actually mean existed. So the form with
Blive.
is the only one to use here.
Han har kun 50 euro i kontanter.
He has only 50 euros in cash. Word for word, He has only 50 euro in cash. Notice the word for 50 in Danish.
50.
Danish has a very unusual way of forming numbers from 50 to 100, which is not found in the other North Germanic languages. They developed from multiples of 20 rather than multiples of 10. The word for 50
50.
means something like half 3 times, meaning 3 times 20 minus half of 20. 60 is
60.
meaning 3 times, 3 times 20. 70 is
70.
meaning half 4 times. 80 is
80.
meaning 4 times. 90 is
90.
meaning half 5 times. In the equivalent ordinal numbers, we can see the unabbreviated form of the numbers, which shows their etymology. 50th
50. Sinds.
is the genitive of
Sinde.
which means times, but it's an archaic word. The modern word is,
Gange.
and its genitive form is
Ganges.
60th,
60.
70th,
70.
80th,
80.
90th.
90.
If you're familiar with either of the other continental North Germanic languages, then I'm sure it's obvious to you that Danish is similar to them for the most part, with some difference in grammar, spelling, a little bit more difference in vocabulary, and most of all, differences in pronunciation. The phonological developments that have taken place in Danish mean that one phoneme can have a variety of sounds depending on the other sounds that surround it, and that the sounds often don't correspond to the spelling of words. But hopefully you've seen that there are some patterns to those differences, and that it's far from impossible to learn Danish pronunciation. Especially for speakers of Swedish and Norwegian who have trouble understanding Danish, I think it would be pretty easy to learn to understand it by learning those patterns and then getting lots of exposure to Danish. The question of the day. I think I've asked a similar question before in another video, but for speakers of Danish, how easy is it for you to communicate with Norwegian and Swedish speakers? Are you able to adjust your speech so that they can understand you? And Norwegian and Swedish speakers, are you able to communicate with Danish speakers? And other people, what's your impression of Danish? Which of its features stand out to you? I hope this has been an interesting and entertaining look at the Danish language, but if you want to develop actual skills in the language, then click the link in the description to visit Danish Class 101, or visit langfocus.com/Danish class. It's the most extensive Danish course I've ever seen, with literally hundreds of lessons for learners of any level, and the lessons get progressively more challenging as your level improves. As the name suggests, they're podcast-based lessons, which is great for people who like to learn using audio materials and for people who want to learn on the go. These days, I try to focus much more on audio materials than I used to, so that I can build my listening comprehension and do my best to imitate native pronunciation. But Class 101 and Pod 101 courses offer more than just audio lessons. They have lots of video lessons, as well as downloadable books and PDF materials, so that you can get visual input and explanations of all the language introduced in the lessons. They also have audio recordings of the individual words and phrases, so you can review them individually. And you can create vocabulary flashcards that use spaced repetitions to help you memorize the words more easily. They also offer quizzes to help you review lessons, word lists of the most commonly used words, and other features. For Class 101 and Pod 101 courses in general, I recommend using the additional tools such as the downloadable lesson notes and the spaced repetition flashcards to review and solidify what you learn in each lesson before moving on to the next one. For Danish specifically, I really recommend you focus on the lesson vocabulary words and their recordings so that you can hear each individual word clearly pronounced and imitate it. If you have an awareness of the features of Danish pronunciation, like those mentioned in this video, and then you practice imitating the pronunciation of the individual words while observing their spelling, that should be of tremendous help in taking on Danish phonology. I've never learned a language using only a Class 101 or Pod 101 course, but I'm a member of several of their courses and I regularly use them as part of my study program. Lots of content is free, including all new lessons, which are free for the first couple of weeks. And then if you want access to all the content, you can upgrade to a paid account. I really recommend you check out innovative language courses, whether for Danish or one of 33 other languages they offer. Click the link in the description to get a free lifetime account. I also want to give a big shout out to all the Langfocus Patreon supporters, especially the top tier patrons whose names are on the screen. Check out patreon.com/Langfocus and check out the benefits of the various tiers. And to everyone, thank you for watching and have a nice day.